everybody. I am here today with Nikki from Serious Canine Working Dog Club and Allied Canine Training Academy in Prince George. And she's going to tell us all about IGP and her clubs up there. So, Nikki, can you tell us just a 30,000 foot overview of who you are?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for the opportunity to be able to talk about our sport a little bit, to grow it in the community. A little bit of background for me was my interest in animals. I've always had animals my entire life since I can remember. And the very first dog that we had when I was a baby was a retired show dog, Peppy, who was a poodle.
Oh.
And so that just kind of led into a whole lifetime of tons of animals in my younger years, primarily up until I probably in my 20s. We had rescue dogs. So it was always SPCA, the Humane Society type of things. And from that led to my passion for IGP. So that's kind of how I all got started in dog sport and sports, was rescuing a German Shepherd mix who was quite broken in terms of his emotional and behavioral abilities. And that really instilled in me a huge passion to learn how to more effectively train a dog, but more importantly, how to build relationships with dogs that have had really significant issues in their past life. And that also brought my passion for dealing with reactivity, because he was highly reactive and had some very quite scary aggression tendencies with anything to do with touching him, doing nails and that sort of thing. So back then, there was no such thing as cooperative care. There was really no such thing as this counter conditioning. So this was a lot of learning on my own without the internet. So that brought me to training with some people in town to help me kind of work through these behaviors, some of which went very well and some which didn't go so well. So again, that made me have to really dig a little bit deeper for how can I work with this specific dog. So then the people that I was kind of hanging out and training with at the time for things like tracking and some obedience work with him were involved in the sport of IGP, which is historically called Schutzhund, and now we've renamed it to IGP. And that really interested me. I loved the idea of the obedience, the tracking, the protection work, which I'll talk about a little bit later, was definitely not for this dog because of his reactivity and aggressive tendencies. But that is what brought me into the sport. And so successfully having worked with a dog like that really instilled my passion for dog training then as well. So that was my start of the journey. That was over 25 years ago. And it seems like it was just yesterday.
Really. Time flies.
It really flies. And I look back going, how was this so long ago? But that's what's exciting, is I think we all start somewhere. And there's usually that one special dog that kind of starts our journey for dog sport or dog training. And that was mine, was Brody.
Cool. That's a nice name too.
It was Barney when we adopted him, but I'm like, no, you're not a dinosaur, Brody.
So what are your credentials now for training, judging, hosting, any of that going on?
So what's unique about that is, so I have started with my partner a dog training business. So right now what we're doing is we're looking at some of the various type of credentialing that can be obtained in dog training community world. And so we're working on, in the future, doing the knowledge assessed certification. Cool. In my particular sport for IGP, it's very complex in terms of becoming a judge, and there's also no formal credentials to teach or anything like that, because it's a dog sport club. So in other words, we just do informal coaching amongst our members, and often we'll bring in people that have some higher levels of expertise, like who have gone to the world champions and that sort of thing. Cool. To kind of guide us and provide us with some new thinking and new ideas. So in terms of the coaching piece of that, I've coached multiple people. I've been been involved in the Sportschützen for over 16 years now. And so we do work very much as a team-oriented approach. And the coaching is done kind of more on a basis that we just share knowledge amongst each other. So we don't have one specific, like expert. But of course, there are people that, have been in the sport longer that can help guide some of the newcomers. The other thing is I've recently just developed an interest in the possibility of judging in some various sports, because aside from IGP, I've been doing some other sports with Justice, one of my dogs. Thanks to COVID, that really kind of got us interested in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But the judging aspect would be absolutely phenomenal. In our sport, it takes decades almost to become a judge, and you have to have titled quite a few dogs, which I'm not quite there yet. So hopefully at some point that will become a reality for us. But right now,
yeah, some of the sports are a fair bit more complex than other ones, and the judging criteria for some organizations are way harder than others. So it's really interesting to see what's sort of out there and variety.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, which makes it harder for, excuse me, smaller communities to offer some of these sports when you have to bring a judge in from the States or farther. So yeah,
Yes.
It's all interesting. So what dogs do you have now, and what sports are you playing with them?
So right now I have 2 German Shepherd dogs. So after my Brody experience, every dog after Brody has been a German Shepherd dog, aside from some of the ones that I've taken in just as kind of like palliative rescues, so to speak. So I have a 6-year-old German Shepherd dog, working line. That's Justice. So she just turned 6 recently. Unfortunately, I think she's developing some type of health issues in respects to some physical things. So we're heading down to see Dr. Lane. Hopefully.
Take mine with her.
I know. I'm like, I should do a Dr. Lane trip and bring a bunch of dogs. So right now with her.
We can talk about that after.
I know, we totally need to. So with her, I have done IGP with her, obviously, since she was a puppy. And so we did just do our IGP one this past year. Again, COVID was very difficult for a lot of sports, right? Because all the titling went on hold and the training went on hold. So unfortunately, while she was at her peak, that's when COVID hit. So we took a little bit of a break and started doing some online things, rallies, scent work, trick training, parkour, all kinds of cool stuff. So she will be hopefully, I'm hoping, my competition dog for this year, if the news is good. And if not, then I'll just focus on doing tracking in the sport with her, which we can totally do. Cool. My other dog is, again, a working line German Shepherd. I'm addicted. And he just turned 3. So right now, usually in our sport, the age of about 3, 4, 5 is their prime years for competition and, training. But the sport can be very physically demanding, which I don't push my dogs to that degree. I like to wait it out a little bit and not push things too hard. And he will hopefully be titled this year. And I'm really hoping to get him to regionals and potentially nationals for next year. Cool. So yeah, it's very exciting. He's my first black German Shepherd dog.
Oh, I love the black. Yeah. It's the hair that I don't know that I could do.
Right? But what's funny is he doesn't shed barely at all for a German Shedder. My other dog, he doesn't. So I'm like, oh, this black hair thing is okay with you.
Yeah.
I like it. So those are my 2 right now. I don't think I'm going to be looking for a third anytime soon. But that's the other kicker in our sport too with our dogs. A lot of people tend to cycle through dogs who are at higher level competition, as we know. So once their competition days are done, or if the dog is not physically able to do the sport, then, they can go to a pet home. Once my dogs are in my home, they're in my home for life. So I can't have 10 dogs in my house. So usually my limit will be 2.
I'm like, well, some people might disagree with you and say 10 is a good number, but I think 2 is pretty good myself.
I know. I would love the 10, but it's not going to happen even when I retire.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about what organization you compete with.
So the organization that I compete in, again,
Sorry.
old name was Schutzhund, and then it went through, which essentially means protection dog in German. So the sport is rooted in Germany, obviously the history of it. And so now it was called IPO before it was called IGP, but that only lasted a couple years. So it's now been named IGP, which is this very long German name. But essentially what it is a sport that is a titling sport and also a brood suitability type of titling sport that consists of 3 phases. So one of the phases is tracking, the other phase is obedience, and then the third phase is protection. So based on that, the sport in Germany has been there for I mean, it's 1901, I believe, was one of the first trials that they had in Germany. So this is a very old sport. Canada was not so old. Canada started in the late 60s. So what's quite interesting with this is it was a very informal community in 1968. There was just groups of people that just started training for Schutzen without really having an end goal or titling. They were just, let's do Schutzen with these German Shepherd working line dogs. And so the other thing I should mention is it's not, if you don't have a German Shepherd dog, you absolutely can do Schutzen. Usually it's more geared towards the working, protection, herding type of breeds. But we have had labs in our sport that have done very well. We've had poodles. There's like any breed can do it if your dog has the drive and the desire to do the sport. We are happy to have any breed in our sport, and it can be a mixed breed. It doesn't matter. That just affects things a little later if you want to title it higher levels. But other than that, anybody is welcome in our sport. So back to Canada. So an informal group started in 1968, and then the decision was made to formalize it. And so in the 70s is when Canada became an actual organization called the German Shepherd Schutzen Club of Canada. And from that, the first trials were held. And the sport has just grown since that time. So here we are today. We still have our parent organization in Canada, which is the German Shepherd Schutzen Club of Canada. And we belong as individual member clubs to our national parent organization. So that brings in Serious Canine Working Dog Club that you mentioned earlier. That's one of our clubs in Prince George.
Cool. I think it's really cool with the different sports too, right? So it's not just sort of one thing.
Yeah, and that's what makes it challenging as well, right? But it's so exciting to just have variety. We need this.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's talk about each one. So which would you recommend of the 3? Sort of how would you get started in it?
To get started in Schutzen or IGP, there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of different ways to do this. As we all know, British Columbia is a little challenged geographically. Some of the larger centers, for example, there's multiple clubs in the Lower Mainland because they can sustain that with the population based in the interest. So the beautiful thing about that is to be able to have some different clubs in an area affords people a better fit. For example, some clubs may be more competitive based, some clubs may be more social based, some clubs are more geared towards high level competition, etc. So having the opportunity to be able to find a club that fits for you and your dog is really, really important, because to train successfully in the sport, you absolutely need to have a team to work together with you. So what's happened recently now with this whole push to going to a lot of online options has been very exciting for our sport. Before the internet, before all these online options, it was really difficult to get involved in the sport or to potentially do the sport unless you were located in a larger center that had a physical club. And nowadays what we're finding is, even though you perhaps are in a more remote location, some clubs are actually offering satellite type of packages for members. Now we have Facebook, we have, like working groups that we can do online stuff. We can help people coaching online virtually as a club. So our new club in Prince George is going to be offering a satellite opportunity.
Awesome.
And hopefully reach out to some of these members, because we get how frustrating it is. Being in Prince George we're not super small, but we are geographically restricted for our sport. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. So we're excited by that opportunity. There's also tons of online resources if people are thinking they're potentially interested in Schutzen. There's tons of trainers online that offer training programs specifically virtually. So that's an option that people can do if they're not able to hook up with a physical club as well. So that's a really good way to get started, to see if you like the exercises and the sport and whatnot. If you're lucky enough to live in an area where there is a club, then the simple way to see if you're interested is to contact some of the clubs in the area. So again, for us in Prince George, we have our club, Serious Canine Working Dog Club. There's also another Schutzhund club as well, Northern Canine. And so that club as well does accept new members. And so the best thing to do is to reach out to both of the clubs, and both are on social media. And you can do some visits. So you can just come in, hang out, see what the club is about, see what we do with our dogs, whether you think that it would be a good fit for you. And then you can enter into probationary type of memberships and start training with your dog with a group of people. So that's the best way to get involved in the sport. I will just really say it's so important, again, to find a good fit for you. So if you are thinking, IGP looks really interesting, it looks really exciting to me, I would encourage people to connect up with as many clubs in your area as possible and go visit each club to see what you feel melds with you and your dog the best.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know, excuse me, if you know this, but I do a course as part of this membership, excuse me, and talk people through all the resources that they need as well. So I'll get you to send me some lists maybe of some of the online options for people, and we'll add that in as well.
Perfect. That is fabulous. Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay. So would it be sort of obedience would be sort of the core of what you want to start training your dog for these?
Excellent question. Excellent point. And yes, you are correct. So really, at the end of the day, as I mentioned, our sport is 3 phases. So the beauty about our sport as well is, although it's 3 phases, we have the tracking, the obedience, and the protection piece. There are times, like I mentioned earlier with my dog Brody, he was definitely not a candidate to do protection work as a typical Schutzhund dog, because he had some not good reactivity behaviors and some aggression that wasn't in a good place. So he would not be a good candidate. This is a sport, and we're looking for dogs that are sport oriented in all 3 of those phases. So he was not eligible for protection work, for example. However, he could track, and doing obedience was something that I could do with him as well. So that was my start into Schutzhund. So I would not do protection with a dog like that. And I would absolutely encourage that people don't, because that's not what our sport is about. We're looking for dogs that have sound temperaments that are able to do the work. We don't train guard dogs. This is a sport. So for us, it's very important that obedience is our foundation for all 3 phases of the sport, even including tracking. Like in our sport, the tracking is a little bit different than some of the other tracking sports that you might hear about. Again, our sport is geared towards competition. So for us, the tracking is almost, I'm going to say, artificial, because we're teaching the dogs to check like literally footstep by footstep by footstep. So within that does become an obedience type of behavior that, you do need to check every single footstep for paces, a track that's up to 300 paces, up to 1200 paces. So the obedience does root into even tracking. So we're like, yes, do obedience. The biggest piece for our sport as well, in addition to the obedience, is we're looking for dogs that have a lot of good engagement behaviors with their handlers. The sport is dog and handler together working. So that piece is also very, very important for us. So when we say obedience is our foundation in the sport, if you love doing obedience with your dog, Schutzhund is a fantastic fit. So we're looking for dogs that want to work with their handlers. We're looking for handlers that really want to work with their dogs. So it's a very close partnership in our sport. However, that said, again, if you can't do protection and you can only do tracking and obedience with your dog, you are welcome in the sport of Schutzhund. And a lot of people start that way, and then their second dog is a better candidate to be able to do all 3 phases. And then you can title the full title in our sport. So you can do a title just in tracking. You can do a title just in obedience. You cannot do a title just in protection. So this is, again, it speaks to the looking for the temperament of a dog that's appropriate, which is why we're not training only protection dogs. Right. So to get a full Schutzhund title, you have to be able to pass in your tracking, your obedience, and in your protection in a trial that occurs over 1 to 2 days. So you do all 3 phases over a 1 to 2 day period to be eligible for a full title.
Cool. That sounds fun.
It's super fun. It's a very addicting sport.
So when you said footsteps tracking, that's the sort of the same idea as CKC tracking? They do
It
footsteps as
is.
well?
Yes, it is. There's a lot of similarities in CKC tracking. CKC tracking, for our sport, we're very points based. So you
Okay.
start your sport like at 100 points. And then as you're tracking, you might lose 2 points here. If a dog misses an article or doesn't indicate an article that the track layer has left behind properly, you might lose up to 7 points. So at the end of the day, you need a passing score in our sport of 70 points. So it's not a pass fail type of thing like a lot of other tracking sports are. But it is, I would say, a little more meticulous in
Right.
terms of the behaviors we're looking for in the dog's tracking. Whereas with CKC, the dog does footstep track and still has to follow a full track, but the behaviors that they're looking for in CKC tracking are, I hate to say not as specific because they're specific in a different way. So for us, it's very like little pieces will make up your track. Literally, the dog lifts its nose a couple times in the track. That could cause a point deduction. So can you see where I'm going with that one? It's very specific. Yes. So if a dog gets a 100-point track, it's a very, very big deal for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's neat to see the different organizations and how they sort of do the same sort of sport. But yeah,
Yes.
as I'm getting more into this membership thing, like we'll be going through all the different ones and I'm hoping to have like I've done it for nose work, but this is what this organization, these are the specifics you need and we'll go through it that way too. Because I personally haven't done IGP. I haven't seen IGP. Like I was telling you earlier, I played one weekend with my dog and she was just a little too happy. The protection part. So yeah, and there wasn't anybody here at that time either, so we moved on to other games. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Dogs are amazing. They do all the things for
They
fun.
really are amazing. And the beauty too is what we're really excited about in IGP too is it provides you a lot of opportunity to cross over into different sports. So for example, like I said, when COVID hit, Justice was kind of at her prime trialing age. And I'm like, oh, here comes COVID. So that was 2 years of, training that we lost. But on the same note, it opened a lot of doors for both her and I to be able to branch out into other sports. So we also started developing a really keen interest in rally, which of course is an obedience-based sport as well. Like have lots of fun with your dog doing obedience. And we loved it. Like I love rally. So that really ignited a huge passion for me now for rally. So now I titled her in rally and we're doing the working classes in rally as well, because
Cool.
it's really good crossover from IGP. So if you're doing IGP with your dog, you can absolutely do CKC obedience, you can do rally obedience, you can do like so many other, you can do CKC tracking, rules will be different. But
Train once and get a whole bunch of titles.
yeah, totally. So come do IGP. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that is the most exciting part of our sport too.
Okay, so you said for the titles, you can get a title for each sport, or all together. So can you sort of walk us through, say, for tracking, what specifically you need in order to title?
Absolutely. So for our titling, the naming of our titling is a little confusing, like many other organizations are. But so what we have is we will do, for example, we have 3 levels for the full title in our sport. So we have IGP 1, which would be like the first level to do your all 3 tracking, obedience, and protection. Then we have IGP 2, then we have IGP 3. Then again, for the dogs that aren't able to do all 3 of the phases in the sport, you could do, like you said, the tracking title. So to be able to do the tracking title or the obedience title or the all 3 phase title, the first thing you do need is to pass what we call a temperament test. So if you're interested in doing tracking with your dog, Schutzen style tracking or IGP style tracking, you still need to pass an obedient component before your dog can come start titling for tracking. So that obedience component is called a BH, and it's a temperament test with an obedience exercise. So again, we want to make sure that the dogs are temperamentally able to be in a group of people. They can be touched by a judge and by people. They're non-aggressive reactive towards other dogs or people and that sort of thing. So that piece is very important for us, temperament and obedience, to be able to even do tracking. So to do a track track, for example, again, we have different levels within even one tracking title. So we would have a level 1, I could say, a level 2, and then a level 3. And then there's a very advanced tracking title called an FH. So laddering up on that, the complexity and the difficulty of the track increases, of course. And so with a level 1 track, for example, you as the handler would lay your own track and you would walk 300 steps. And you would drop 2 articles, we call them. And so that's something that the track layer would accidentally drop. Let's say if you were somebody that was trying to run away from a police dog. So then the track is then aged 20 minutes, and then you bring your dog up to a starting flag as you're being judged, and then your dog must start to show the tracking. So to show the tracking, the dog must put its nose to the ground, and it must indicate each footstep as much as possible for the entire track and find the lost articles on the track and indicate the articles by either sitting, laying down, or picking up the article and bringing it back to the handler. So after you successfully do your 300 pace track and you find your articles, or your dog does, the track is completed. And again, it's based on a point system. So you need 70 points to be able to pass your track. And if you're unsuccessful with the 70 points, then you would have to repeat the title or the opportunity to try to title at a different trial.
Okay, so it's basically one track can get you the title?
Yes, not 3. Yes, so 1 track can get you a tracking title. Absolutely.
Well, that's cool.
It is really cool. And then after you get that very first track, then you can start to level up into the level 2 tracking, the level 3 tracking. And then, like I mentioned, there's opportunities to do a very long track, which is an FH and then an FH2. So the complexity for that goes up to 1,200 paces, and the track is aged for 3 hours, and you have multiple articles on that track. So it's kind of similar that way in CKC, that CKC has the same, increasing complexity for their tracking titles as well.
Cool. I need to try it.
Oh, tracking is one of the funnest out of. Amazing.
Okay, and so the obedience, how's the titling work for that part?
The obedience piece of it, as I mentioned, before you can try to title in any of the other phases, we do the basic obedience and temperament title, which is the BH. So to do the BH, again, any breed is welcome. We have tons of people that would do absolutely beautifully in a BH who come from a CKC background or a rally background or any obedience background. So that is something that if people have a background in and they're interested in trying our sport, if you join up with our organization, you can absolutely title your dog with a BH. There's just some minor differences, but we help people with all the minor differences get their titles as well. So for the BH, it is an obedience exercise. The dog must demonstrate a lot of heeling on a field, and literally you're heeling over 300 paces with the dog to have good attention to the handler and to stay at the handler's left side. In that pattern, we also have to demonstrate a sit and then walking away from the dog, and the dog must maintain a sit stay. And then we also have to demonstrate a down stay. And then we also have to demonstrate a recall from the down stay. Then that is essentially the completion of your BH obedience component. The dog then goes into a long down stay while another dog is on the field doing its obedience exercises, and the handler is 30 paces away from the dog in the down stay. So that's the one that we really train a lot and proof a lot for. And then that would be your obedience component of the BH. And then there's the temperament component of the BH as well. And that is where the judge will have you healing your dog through a group of people, making sure the dog is neutral, is not showing any reactive behaviors. The dog is put in a down stay while other dogs walk by it. So that is the temperament component. And then if you pass both of those, you get your BH. Then moving on after your BH, again, it's the same as tracking. We have 3 levels within the obedience component. So you would have, for example, your obedience, I'll call it a level 1, and then a level 2, and then a level 3. So you can title just in the obedience, but you need to start with the BH and then the level 1 and then the level 2. So you can't go from a BH to a 3, for example. So again, just like any sport, it has increased complexity for each level. And so starting with the level 1, it's very similar to the BH, only there are added exercises and added complexity for each exercise. So we do sit stay, we do a down stay with the recall, and then we also introduce a stand stay. And then we also introduce a dumbbell retrieve. So the dumbbell retrieve is done, you must show it 3 times. You throw the dumbbell once on the flat, you throw a dumbbell over a 1-meter jump. So that said, your dog has to be able to clear 3 feet in jumping, which is a lot. And then your dog also will do a recall over an A-frame without the dumbbell. So those, and then the downstay, like the BH as well. So if you successfully pass all of those exercises, again, 70 points is the minimum that you are required to have for an obedience title. And each exercise is given specific points. So even, this is where it's a little different and to me a little exciting, because even let's say your dog does not successfully show a sit. That doesn't mean you are not successful. You will lose your points for that exercise, however. So if the exercise is worth 10 points and your dog chooses to stand and then sit, you may still be awarded partial points. So you don't necessarily fail the entire obedience pattern. So that's, yeah, that's a really nice thing because it's point based. So you can still successfully pass, even though your dog is not able to demonstrate each exercise to a perfected ability. And then with the level 2, the complexity increases a little bit more, but the exercises are all the same. The exercises just get a little harder.
Right.
Same with the level 3. So that's the obedience piece of it in a nutshell. And again, the dog still must have a sound temperament to be able to demonstrate all the obedience exercises as well.
Right. Okay. And then the protection?
The protection is what we'll say most people think is the sexy part of Schutz, right? So I want my dog to bite. And again, you know, we do, and it's a very exciting sport for us because it's really based on obedience and control. And so we're not looking to train, like I said earlier, guard dogs. This isn't a sport where we're only training, you know, there's a misconception, I think, for a lot of people. If they hear Schutzen or IGP, they think we're training attack dogs. And that could not, like, it absolutely is not what we do. And even on our national organization website, there's a really good description of what kinds of things we're looking for your dog to be eligible to be a Schutzen dog or to do IGP. And it is definitely not that your dog needs to be highly aggressive. That's not what's going to get you success in the sport, and it's not what the sport is designed for. So again, our sport is designed as a breed suitability test. So the dog must show a willingness to track, a willingness to work with the handler, and a willingness to protect. But that protection is based on working with the handler. And when I say that, what I mean by this is it's the handler and the dog that are working on the field with what we call a helper, which another word for that would be the decoy or the bad guy. But the dog must demonstrate completely obedient behaviors during all the exercises on the field with the bad guy. So the dog is not able to make its own decisions as to, I want to bite, I want to attack. Like, that's not what we're doing. So what we're doing is very specific exercises that will test the dog's innate ability to have the assertiveness to engage with a helper or engage with a bad guy without having fear and without the behaviors being forced upon the dog, so to say. We want a dog that genetically will have the tendencies and the desire to do the work. So again, if you have a dog that really isn't interested in engaging or, you know, biting the bad guy, forcing a dog to try to do that, to do the sport, is really not what we're looking for in our sport, and we discouraging that. So for us, the protection piece begins again with obedience. So you must pass the temperament test to be able to do the exercise. And you'll hear sometimes we're saying, you know, there's a lot of obedience on the field for bites. And so that speaks to the engagement that the dog and the handler can work together. And the dog is always looking to the handler for help, or what do I do next? Like, this is a team-based effort. So for example, coming onto the field for your level 1 protection, you're allowed to have a little bit more control with your dog in terms of help, such as having your dog on a leash. No other tools are allowed for any of the exercises with your dog, aside from a collar and a leash. And in tracking, you may also use a harness if you choose instead. But coming onto the field, you have complete control with your dog. So if the dog knows the bad guy or the decoy is on the field, your dog must still heel with you. The dog will heel with you. You report into the judge, and then your protection exercises would start with you sending your dog to a hidden spot where a helper is hidden behind, and the dog must start to bark at the helper. So we're not sending the dog for direct bites. We're sending the dog for what we call a guard. And so I will go to the bad guy and do a holding behavior, as in barking, to alert the handler that I have found the bad guy. They're right here. So then the handler, upon being given permission from the judge, is allowed to go retrieve their dog. And so the dog must be recalled back to the handler off of the bad guy without biting. And so once that is completed, then the helper leaves the hidden spot, and the dog must remain under control with the handler in an obedient exercise while the bad guy walks away and starts to try to escape. So upon that, you would heel to a specific area with your dog under full control while the helper is leaving. And then as the helper does try to escape or run away, you are allowed to release your dog with a specific command that it is to go engage the bad guy to stop the bad guy from escaping. So can you see why obedience is really important in our sport here? So if your dog chooses to make its own decision, you probably will not be successful in the protection. So
yeah, I'm just thinking through my head, what would Harvey do? He'd probably be like, love me. Do you have treats?
you have a treat.
What do you say? I don't know.
Bite. I just want a treat. Right. So, and like I said, we've had some multiple dogs that have like lovely, temperaments that this is more of a game for them. And that is okay too. Some people are very specific that those are not dogs in the sport. What we want is, this is a sport. So if your dog loves doing the sport and loves doing the exercises in the sport is doable for them and for you. Absolutely. And so then in protection, the remaining of the exercises, once the dog engages the bad guy and does get a bite on them, again, we go back into obedience type of behaviors where if the helper stops resisting and stops running away, the dog must out. So it's no longer allowed to keep biting the bad guy. So the handler must out, and the dog must out. And if the dog is not out, you are not successful in protection. So, the out is a really big deal in our sport. So we train very, very hard for that a lot. And so after the dog does out the bad guy tries to escape, and then the dog must re-engage the bad guy again, and then the sequencing starts again. So then we do multiple other exercises, and they increase in difficulty for level 1, 2, and 3. And then at the end of the day, the two biggest things for us is training the out, because no out means no pass. And also that the dog does not make its own decisions on our field for protection work. The dog must be under control at all times. So that, I think, is the nutshell.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you've got me excited to try it.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Even though I'm like, I don't think Harvey would be good at the protection. He loves obedience so much.
Yes.
Yeah. And he is good at tracking. So, he might get 2 out of 3.
Right? And you can title him the obedience, and you can title him the tracking. So we welcome people who have interest in those pieces of it, and who just have that keen desire to work with their dog. And that's really what we want.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds really fun. Well, I think I've asked you all the questions I had. Is there anything else you could think of that people might need to know before starting this sport? Or
I think for us, a lot of questions that we get about the sport is, if my dog isn't a purebred, am I allowed to do the sport? A lot of people have a conception that, again, it's just German Shepherds. And I spoke to this a little bit earlier. All breeds are welcome in the sport, provided they have a sound temperament. They are absolutely welcome in our sport. We have a lot of people that have Malinois, who have Rottweilers, who have the other protection or herding type of breeds. And those are the dogs, quite honestly, that do tend to do better in the sport. I mean, the sport was designed for a German Shepherd dog. That is what Schutzhund is. So German Shepherds are the masters at not one thing, but the masters at everything. And this speaks to the sport for the tracking, the obedience, and the protection. Some dogs shine in obedience. right? That's their thing. Our dogs, we hope they shine in obedience and tracking and protection, but at the end of the day, we're looking for a well-rounded dog. So other dogs sometimes have a little more difficulty in our sport in relation to doing the protection piece, for example. So you may have a dog that excels in tracking, right? Like a bloodhound. Yes, come track. They would blow away a German Shepherd, right, for that. But on that note, too, it might not be so good in protection work, right?
Yeah. And can it get over the thing? It needs the 3 feet.
It's a little high, right? A Jack Russell Terrier, it's maybe a little jump, but could do it.
Yeah.
So for us, I think it's important for us to go, if your dog can mentally and physically do the sport, absolutely, you and your dog are welcome, and we would love to work with you. But don't be disappointed if the dog doesn't excel as much as a German Shepherd or maybe a Malinois would. Because genetically, those are the dogs that the sport was designed for, first and foremost. That was the big question. The other big question that often comes up is, how does it work in terms of joining the organization? So for us, you must be a member of the parent national organization to be eligible to title. And also for the majority, I would say all clubs in North America and Canada are members of our national parent organization to be able to hold trials. And as such, if you're wanting to become a member of a local club, then you do need to be a member of the national parent organization as well. And I think that's probably true for some other sports, that you have to belong to the bigger organization. So for us, those are 2 really big questions that come to people. The third question that is probably a little challenging for a lot of people is the level of commitment that is required in the sport. Titling in Schutzen is not easy. It takes a long time. It's a long journey. So if you're the type of person that prefers instant gratification type of sport, it may not be for you. So on average, the earliest age you can actually even title a dog in Schutzen is 17 months old, because we don't want to be seeing people pushing their dogs past their mental capabilities. And the 17 months is for just the starting BH, that obedience piece of it. And then the need to be even more mentally mature to be able to do the protection pieces. So it's a long-term sport. It's long-term training. And because there's so many exercises and it involves 3 phases to be able to get a title, that's not going to happen in 4 months for the most part. So on average, for a new handler coming into the sport, there is a good level of commitment that is required. You should be participating and coming to training at least once a week. We understand life happens, and so that may not be a reality, but only training once every 3-4 months in the sport is not going to be an option to be able to title in the sport. We do really hone in that if you want a title, there is a high level of commitment in the sport. It's a very intensive hobby, and like everything nowadays, it's a little costly. So, right, the membership fees and such are usually very reasonable. Most clubs anywhere from $300 a year to $2,000 a year to be a member of a club. So in the North, we're luckier. We don't have to pay $10,000 like maybe does for a field. So our membership fees tend to be a little bit lower, and then you do have to pay a membership fee with our national organization every year, just over $100 for an individual membership. But the pieces that are expensive are the training pieces. So again, geographically being restricted, we have some limitations in things like we need to fly in a judge. We may need to fly in a certified helper, because not everybody can just put a sleeve on and give a dog a bite. That's a huge accident waiting to happen, and it's very, very, very unsafe for the dog, and our dog's safety is paramount. So for us to be able to hold trials, all of our decoys or our helpers, they are all certified by our national organization to say that they are safe to catch a dog, because some of our dogs are running a long distance to do the bite on the handler or on the helper. So that is dangerous if it's not done correctly. And so there is quite a risk involved in the sport, which is why we must have certified helpers. So we fly that in, we fly, a judge in. So you can see the trial starts to get a little expensive after a while. So normally what happens is the club membership fees help to offset those costs and the trial entry fees. We also want to work with people who are experts in the field. So if you are in a location where you have expert helpers, located in your city, then that puts you at a bit of an advantage for training, because then you have access to helper work for the protection phase far more frequently. If you're a little more isolated, like us, we need to bring somebody in who has a high level of expertise for our dogs. Our club is more competitive based. Of course, we want to have fun and enjoy our dogs and each other as well, but we're looking to title. So we bring in people that are certified. We bring in people that do have a high level of expertise in doing protection work to bring the very best out of us and our dogs, and to help also cultivate us to do helper work. I've been a helper. I wear a sleeve. I give advice to dogs. I'm not young anymore, so it gets a little hard when you start getting a little stiffer and older and your shoulders aren't so great. But we do cultivate helper work in all of our members at our club. And so this is very exciting, because all the girls will put a sleeve on and we all give our dogs a bite, but we only do it if we're safe.
Right.
So that is the key component here. I will just really want to hone into people. If you're interested in doing the sport and you're interested in doing Schutzen, please know that there is risk for your dog if you are working with somebody who is not expert in the work of protection. Neck injuries, shoulder injuries, jaw injuries can happen. So it's really important that you have the credentials of who is working your dog as a helper, and also the team that you're working with. If you want to succeed in the sport, see what the club is about. See what the membership is like. Are the members actively titled? Are the members actively training in modern methods? Like, these are things that are really important for you and your dog. So I think in a snapshot, those are the big take-home pieces for us in our sport. And we're always happy to entertain any questions from anybody at any time. So please reach out to us. Come check us out if you're interested, if you're in the area. If you're not in the area and you have no resources, come check us out. Send us a check out satellite options for our membership. We're so excited to have new people come on board.
Yeah, I'm excited to go watch, because, when you see the sport with a well-trained dog, it's just beautiful. And I don't have the patience to do that. I know that. I'm like, I like beginner level. I'll stay there forever.
And that, you know what, that's okay too, So I mean, we're super happy to have people that are just wanting to love and enjoy the sport and their dogs as well. And we do have some members that, for them, they may have a dog that is not going to title at a high level, but the work with their dog, they love it. They're engaged with their dog is engaged with them. That for us is the biggest take home point for our club. And I get it, I mean, I had a miserable fail with Justice at our last trial, and that's tough too. You're putting yourself out there. It's a lot of years of work. And we did great in tracking. The obedience piece was pretty decent. Again, to the health issues, I'm very restricted until I have some answers with her. So I limit all her physical activity in trialing. I don't push her hard because of that. But we passed everything, and her protection was beautiful right until the very end.
Oh, no.
The very last bite, where she decided, I don't think I want to out. I think I want to keep biting this guy. And so right away, that's a fail. So if you pass everything else, there's no title for that. But we did do regionals this year and took high in trial at regionals, and
Cool.
so exciting, high protection and high tracking. So we were super excited about that. So you have a lot of lows in the sport at times, but you also have a lot of highs. And at the end of the day, if you don't pass, you don't pass. You just keep training for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, I see how it's like an all or nothing thing, which makes a little more pressure on you. Because like a lot of them, you can get a Q in each thing and you can add them up and get one.
Exactly, right. Yeah, exactly. Then another trial we had, we were not successful in tracking. And so that was a training fault on my part. So I'm like, we don't train on sod here in Prince George. And that's where the trial was at, because all our trials were essentially out of town until recently, when there was a trial in Prince George again after a very long 12 years of no trials. So I came home and I found sod to track on. That was a training fault for me, but she did beautiful in protection, and we failed in tracking. So no title for us at that one either. But that's okay. This is what it's about. It's training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds so much fun.
It's a huge amount of fun.
Okay, so for people that are watching this or listening, we'll set up a Q&A date with Nikki later in March. And if you're listening after that, it could be in the membership portal. But before then, get your questions. You can post them either in the group or hang on to them, and we'll set up a time, and you can come and pick her brains more. So thank you very much for talking to us, and I'm excited to come see you guys in Prince George.
We're excited to have you. So we do have, I'll put a plug out there,
Oh, yeah.
accreditation trial for our new club that is planned for this spring. So mark your calendars for May. We will do an accreditation trial for one day, and that is to be approved from our national parent organization to say that we are competent and safe to hold trials, and then do our formal trial the second day. So if you have a dog that you think could do the BH and you want some help with that, you have some questions about that, let us know, and we can help guide you. For if you're anybody that's interested in joining the sport, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have people come watch. We really want to start building capacity for the sport in the region. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Super, super exciting.
Do you have an exact date in May yet?
We do. So we do have our trial approved at that point in time. And let me just get you the date for the accreditation trial. And we will post that as well on your events list too, which will be really exciting. And we also do have plans to do a fall trial. So probably in mid-October. We don't have our date set for that quite yet, though. So our May trial, we're looking at doing the May weekend for the 27th and the 28th. So the accreditation trial would be the 27th, and then the actual formal trial would be the 28th.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to come watch, even if I can't compete yet.
Absolutely, you must come watch, and let's see if I got Justice on the field, if she'll out. It'll be a mystery for all of us.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again, and we will talk soon.
Thank you so much.